I know this is kind of a weird experience for us of in person and virtual. But at the current time, I think we have over 25 people participating in combination. So it's a good start, and I bet some other people will be wandering in as well too. Megan, do you want to introduce yourself? I think everybody knows you, but go right ahead.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Megan Odom. If you don't know me, I'm the network manager at the Collider. I've been here for almost 2 years. I started out as a student intern and then transitioned to full-time after I graduated as the event manager. And then COVID happened, and that kind of became a fluid job of doing whatever needed to be done. And then in January, Miles and I got promoted to co-directors. And in the last month, it's really 2 weeks, it's just me. So it's been fun. It's been a roller coaster. And here we are. I leave for graduate school in a couple of weeks. And yeah, so that's
Good.
me.
Yeah, so I think you all know me. I'm Jim Fox. I am on the board. My official position is board liaison. So I'm the board member that liaisons with the staff, which used to be a larger staff, but I liaison with Megan. Anyway, we thought today would be a great opportunity for us all to get together and just have a discussion about kind of what has happened over the past couple of years and where we're at today, and then jointly decide, you know, what's kind of in the future for our network and all of us as well too. I do notice that a lot of the other board members have joined us virtually as well too. So I think we've got a very good representation from the board at the meeting here as well to be listening to this discussion from the members. So Megan, you're driving. Why don't we go ahead and get started with the slides?
Sure. So I just want to start off by thanking everyone for coming. Just a lot of gratitude there. We have a few housekeeping things before we begin. First off, just a friendly reminder that this meeting is being recorded for those who are unable to make it, as well as just as for your reference, because no decisions are going to be made today. You'll have 2 weeks to continue the discussion afterwards. And also, if you are joining us virtually, we ask that you keep your mics muted, just if you're not speaking, just to keep the background noise as minimal as possible. So to begin, we always start off our meetings, whether it's a quarterly member meeting or a board meeting, by centering ourselves around the Collider's mission, vision, and values. These were written by Collider members for Collider members during the last pivot, which really took the Collider in a network-centric model back in July of 2019. So the Collider's mission is to be a nonprofit network of member businesses, organizations, academic institutions, and individuals, all working to advance climate solutions so that all can mitigate, adapt, and thrive in a changing world, with a vision to be a national example of a working climate services network through creating jobs, providing education and training opportunities, and supporting one another to enable success. With the 3 core values of a changing climate impacts all of us, and we must all be invested in finding solutions to be more resilient and mitigate climate drivers. That collaboration is critical for success. So we must find a way to get the network model to work. And lastly, that this is not only a life's work, but it's a livelihood. So we must find ways to create good paying jobs linked to the climate services. And this third bullet point is going to become very crucial later on in the presentation.
Right. And I just want to add that, you know, this is kind of the work that we all did starting 2 years ago. Those of you that were here, you know, with the whiteboards and the Post-its and everything. But it has been the map or the guide that has served both the board and the staff through the ensuing 2 years of a lot of changes to make sure that all decisions were based off of the mission, vision, and values. And so this is always kind of the key metric that we all always ought to be considering. And if there's something wrong with these mission, vision, and values, that's something else we'll need to discuss as well too. But anyway, this is where we're at, and hopefully everybody's nodding their heads of, yeah, I had a part in this, and this looks to be very much. Yeah, so go ahead, Megan.
Yeah, so we have a really brief meeting agenda that we just want to go over. So the first small portion of the meeting is just going to be providing you with some background information. So I'll be going over some membership information, and Jim will be going over some financial information. And the majority of the meeting is going to be a listening session for the board and staff, gaining member input and guidance on a path forward. And our primary objective is to come away with a clear path forward for the organization that continues to put the network first. Yeah. So in the spirit of full transparency, we really want to make the decision-making process as, for lack of a better word, as transparent as possible. So when Miles was still with us or on staff, we began the process of putting together the slide deck and the planning process of potential options that we saw and that we wanted to propose to you. So the staff has put together a series of options for you guys to discuss. And we have a preliminary poll that we've put together on Slido. And that's what that green little circle thing with the 6-digit code is in the top right-hand corner of the presentation. And we'll talk more about that a little bit later when it becomes important. But if during the discussion, none of what we suggest feels right, that's completely okay. All we ask is that you put forth an alternative for the discussion. And again, no decisions are going to be made today. Again, this meeting is being recorded, and I'm going to send that recording out along with directions for the discussion portion, the online discussion portion, as well as the Slack poll where you'll be able to cast your vote. And it will be an anonymous vote as well, so people won't be able to see what your vote is, if that's a concern. You'll have 2 weeks to be able to cast your vote and continue the discussion. The poll will close at end of day on July 14th. Once the poll is closed, all of this information, so the discussion forum, your casted vote, and the notes that the board will be taking today from the listening session will all be given to the board members, and they'll make the final vote. They'll cast the final vote, make the final decision on behalf of the network based off of your input and guidance. Yeah. So what is our current reality? So this is a very macro overview. Yeah, sorry. So back in 2020, the staff put together an analysis of the Collider ecosystem, and we found that there were 6 climate-based subnetworks that resided in the Collider ecosystem, with a 7th subsector that was woven through each of the 6 subnetworks. And we found that there was good interaction between some, but not all of the subnetworks, with limited interaction or collaboration between each of them. So they were essentially just siloed to themselves. There was collaboration within some of them, but not between them. About half of them were active at the time, and they were the Resilience, Climate and Data, National Report Generation, and the Education and Outreach subnetworks. And our data also showed that they're likely to continue working together into the future. And we also found that some of our organization, like our member organizations, were doing just fine without the support of the network. So these are just some membership stats at a glance. So if you'll recall, back in September, the board voted to disassociate the network, so the nonprofit from the space, which is the Callan Center, or the event space and the co-working space. So the staff and Jim, and we also had a lot of help from Dave at NEMAC. He really helped us with our business model canvases and our member interviews and our value propositions. He guided us through those exercises. Really worked to reshape the business model and our membership model. And so our new membership model is monetarily a twofold model. So we have our tenant members, which Delta Management generously agreed to contribute $1,000 towards. And that is anybody who resides in either the outside offices or the co-working space prior to the split. So, I mean, that's self-explanatory, but a non-tenant member is a virtual member or anybody who's in like the co-working space after the split. And then, so we have 51 tenant members, and these are individual members, not organizations. And then we have 18 tenant members, and you can see where they're subdivided by each subcategory. And then we have one institutional member, and their value doesn't come monetarily, it comes from in other forms. And prior to Miles leaving, he was the membership manager, and he put his primary goal was to try and recruit more members, and he found it harder than we initially projected to try and recruit more people, mostly because of COVID.
Yeah, and I'm going to add one other point. We do know that we have a lot of people that are working in the climate services arena here locally that also belong to professional organizations nationally.
Yeah.
ASAP, the American Society of Adaptation Professionals, we have a lot of members here in Asheville that belong to that don't belong to the Collider. The same thing is true for AMS and others as well too. Marjorie, I noticed you had your hand up. We'll probably just have a discussion when the discussion is here.
She said September. She just issued September, I didn't know what year. Okay, so we saw
September of 2020. Yeah, and you've got access to the minutes of the board. Yeah. So the question was when did we separate out the space from the network? And that was September of last year.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Megan. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and just the key takeaway from this slide is that our current revenue model, in our current revenue model, we need about $3,000 to meet our goal, and we're still at about 1,700 and some change. So we're a little over halfway there. And in continuance, with our member interviews, these were our pattern findings, our key pattern findings. If you just want to read through them, some of the more interesting ones were, unsurprisingly, members really valued the space, and they really valued the support from like-minded individuals, as well as, again, the being able to provide professional development and the ability to partner and collaborate on projects. Yeah. And now I'm gonna pass the baton on to Jim.
Great, thanks. Hopefully this will show you some of these clear dates, and we've really been trying to continue to react to a changing business environment and realities. Remember back in April of 2019 is when MAC decided to stop heavily investing in the collider. And right after that, NEMAC, Dave, Ian, and I basically put together a document that MAC started calling the Fox plan to say, well, no, let's not close the doors. Let's, see if we can get the network to be self-supporting. Admittedly, once we looked at the sub-network mapping, we probably made some false assumptions because we were pretty much focused on the area of climate services that NEMAC is used to. And so it was a little bit more geared towards some resilience in the national report and data generation side. And so fortunately, we've been able to learn from what the staff did for investing in that. January of 2020, there was a new business model, and the staff led by Mary Spivey, who's here with us today, and Megan and Miles got the collider to be financially stable. So looking at, how the events and, tenants and all could, get the books to balance. Of course, then right after that, March of 2020, COVID happened. We weren't able to hold events. A lot of people said, no, I think I can just work virtually instead of showing up. Had a pretty large impact on that. And then in August 2020, the members working with the staff did finalize this assessment of the subnetworks that Megan mentioned, of the 6 primary subnetworks. Why don't we go to the next slide? So here, Marjorie, this is September 2020. We voted to separate the space. Mac Pearsall has generously agreed to, at that time, donated $30,000, and Claire Callan, generously agreed to pay for the tenant members through the $1,000 a month contribution by Delta Management, that Megan's already gone over. During the last quarter of 2020, the board and staff really kind of finalized how this was all going to work. And then in January of 2021, Mary transitioned to NEMAC. And as Megan said, her and Miles became co-directors. May of this year was when businesses nationwide started to return to, and I've got this in quotes, normal. Who knows exactly what normal is, right? But it kind of sets up our new reality, and we have started seeing more people showing up on the floor and a variety of things happening. But right after that, also, the other reality is, Miles and Megan have announced their impending departure from the organization. We really need to thank Miles and Megan for their great service, and this is not unusual. Collider staff through the years have looked at these as being transition jobs, and we're just going through another one of these transitions. But I think we also recognize that the whole nationwide workforce is asking themselves questions. Are they in the right job? And if not, what is the right job for them as well, too? So these are not unexpected outcomes, but it does put us into a place where we need to make some decisions as members today. Go ahead, Megan. We just wanted to be very transparent with people about the financial story. And we are nonprofit. We've worked very hard, especially the staff has worked very hard at getting the nonprofit to really be following all the guidelines that a nonprofit ought to be following. And so in the spirit of that, we want to always be very transparent and open about what finances look like. Well, this is, from the beginning of 2019 to, where we're at today in 2021. And you can see the story of the blue line being average incomes and the red line being average expenses. And as the blue line continued to go down, staff kept doing what was necessary to bring the red line down as well, too. But I mean, the story is, you know, despite the best efforts, that line, you know, there's always been a departure and it's been negative, despite some of these best efforts. And so let's look at a little bit of those details. Go to the next slide. So let's look at where the income is coming from. Notice the large green bar. That's Mac Pearsall's donations. And, you know, all of us continue to say thank you to Mac. Please continue to do so. But you can see the very powerful story behind this slide, that in April of 2019, when Mac said, okay, let's go ahead and find a way to get the network to work, you could see how Mac's, you know, donations have, you know, continued to decline, but also notice that Mac has not gone away. You know, he's still saying, I believe in what's happening in the network, and there's still green bars, you know, in this year as well too. What's also important to notice is the blue bars. This is co-work revenues. Remember how we were set up? That the nonprofit was basically owning and managing the co-work space as well as the event space. And that was part of the income stream. And you can see the blue bar disappearing here, you know, in Q3 2020, as we separated the network from the physical space. But it was also driven by the disappearance of the red bar, right? Due to COVID, that the income that we were getting from the events, you know, even though those had been really starting to increase quite a bit due to the efforts of the staff and especially Megan, those were looking pretty good in the Q1 of 2020. COVID hit, we couldn't use this room and others, and that went away. And so also there is some small lines of contracting. The staff is also then contracted to do some member work just to help pay for some of the staff salaries as well too. And so this has helped balance the books a little bit too, but that's been a small amount. Okay, Megan. So, you know, this is then kind of how things worked, right? As far as memberships and, you know, how those things came in. We used to have a very large blue bar because as people rented a desk or a small office, that basically contributed to the membership. But by and large, that was really then passed through to be paying for the lease of that space to the landlord here as well too. What we can see is then as we separated, Claire and Ocean Delta were able to transfer a lot of the blue and replace that with the yellow part that Megan talked about, and how important that $1,000 a month is for the memberships for the people that do lease space. And that's a nice synergy, right? For people that, you know, do rent a space here. That was part of the values that people said they had, is a nice place to work. And so that synergy is there, but you can still see that what Megan was talking about, we would love for the membership part of our revenue model to be more at about $3,000, but it's still below $2,000. And so we're not generating enough revenue from membership fees to be helping balance the books. Okay, go to the next slide. So this is kind of the financial story about quarterly expenses, right? I want you to notice a few things sitting through here that let's just start with the blue bar, right? Prior to separation, you know, the blue bar was sitting through there. The nonprofit was paying for the rent on the co-working space, the event space, and that then transitioned. The additional part of the blue bar is the property tax that we have to pay to Buncombe County, and this is for the furniture, facilities, and equipment. The chairs you guys are sitting on, the projectors, the Wi-Fi, those pieces as well too. So that's still in here. You can notice that, during the start of Q1, let's be looking at the red bar. The amount of money that we were spending on staff at that time was substantial. And notice the size of the red bar now compared to the red bar at that time. We've continued to be not only lowering the number of staff, but also not paying them very much. But we have been dedicated to paying a living wage, part of our values of our nonprofit. And so we refuse to go below what's a living wage in Asheville for paying our staff as well too. It's one of our bottom line driving values. One of the other ways that we were able to cut expenses is the other category. And Megan, can fill you in on anything and everything that was in the other category. And it was numerous, but we've just kept whittling away and saying, well, what's, really essential for keeping the doors open and all as well too. I think the other thing is the nice partnership we have with Delta, the landlord. A lot of those expenses have been moved over, for running the co-work space and things as well too. So we need to recognize that as well. But you can see that, the average expenses have been going down, but we're still living beyond our means. We're writing more checks than we're getting checks in the mail. Okay, so go on, Megan. So just kind of in summary, since the start of 2019, we've really kind of been in the red. And for all of the Collider's existence, since we first opened the door, it's been primarily funded by Mac Pearsall. If you look at a kind of a bottom line expense that excludes personnel, it's right at about $900 a month. And then you add personnel on top of that for operating. So, what you're hearing today is our income stream is not really sufficient to support even just one full-time staff person at a living wage. And so as Megan is leaving to pursue her master's degree in related work, and we're very happy for you, Megan, but we're going to be sorry to leave you. But we really have to start saying, okay, well, what do we want to do? And what sort of choices? And just as a reminder for, the Collider's, value statements as well too, that our third value applies to staff just as much as it applies to all of us as members, that this is not only a life's work, but also a livelihood. And so we always have to be providing our staff with a good paying job, but also through a way to be using this as a transition job to be doing what they want to be doing with the future of their career as well too. Okay. Let's go on, Megan. This is just kind of a repeat of the slide that Megan opened up with. And just as we start going over some of these options, just want to remind people that we're here to discuss these options. And no decisions are being made today. We are a member-driven and a member-led organization. And we want to really be doing that very much today. It's not only, the people that are here with us today, both in person and virtually, to start this discussion, but we also, since especially during the middle of summer vacation time here as well too, we wanted to give members a full 2 weeks to be able to join in the conversation. That's why we're recording it. That's why we're going to keep the polls open, emails and all too. But also we are a nonprofit that is driven by the board, that we are going to be listening to members, but it is the board that will vote, making the final decision. Right. So let's go to the next slide. Since we're both virtual and in person, we just need to kind of operate a special way here today. So we appreciate your patience with us. But for those of you that are in the room, well, let's first go this way. We probably have equal participation both in person and virtually. So that's why Megan is virtual and running the meeting from where she is, and I'm here. We're going to try to make this very equal, and as people want to have a turn to speak, we're going to take turns between the virtual and the people in the room. So also, just to be able to handle our technologies, for those of you in there in the room, you know, if you'd like to speak, just kind of get my attention, and you know, we'll give everybody an opportunity. You know, wait for me to call on you, and then once you're called on, please come to the podium. And the reason that is so you can speak into the microphone, not only for the people in the room, but also you're speaking into the microphone so that people that are participating virtually can fully hear you and see you. There's not a camera on you as the audience here, but there is a camera on the PC here so that you're going to show up to them as well too. Okay. And for those on the virtual call, just let Megan know if you'd like to speak. You know, just put a comment in the group, and she and I'll just be continuing to coordinate to open the floor to the people. So everybody kind of understanding how this is going to go? Great. Well, we'll learn by doing. None of us have, well, Megan and I haven't done this before. Maybe somebody else has, but we'll see. Okay, so let's go on the next slide, Megan. Oh no, are you okay? Great.
Okay.
So the choices for the future direction of the Collider really kind of boils down to two main questions that we need to address. First of all, what are members willing to do? You know, either contributing time or money to support the network. You know, are people willing to volunteer more time? Are they willing to pay more dues? Are they willing to, you know, go find people that are willing to spend more money? Those sort of pieces. And then we really have to say what level of staff support is viable based on our financial reality. Okay, so two main questions. And Megan, why don't we go to the next slide? We can come back to these. So I kind of want to lead the discussion for what members are willing to do. I'm a member. You know, over the past 2 years, I've volunteered about 10 hours a week for doing this role. I'm willing to continue to do that. But it becomes clear that I understand and know a lot more about the resilience subsector than the others. And so that's probably going to be my primary focus. And, you know, maybe it has been over the past 2 years as well, too. I've also paid for the Collider staff to be members of our National Professional Society, ASAP, and I've covered the Collider's organizational membership fee. I think most of you realize that the Collider is an organizational member of our national society. But really, I think we can drop that ASAP organizational membership for two main reasons. Two of our members are already organizational members. NEMAC and Fernleaf is the public-private partnership is one of those organizational members. And NOAA's Climate Program Office is also an organizational member. And I think, you know, that's sufficient for representation. And I'm also, you know, going to be happy to work with other members who are interested in leading their subsector, you know, to interact with the Collider staff, whatever level we decide that to be as well, too. And then Megan, maybe we ought to go over the one other slide before we open it up to comments as well, too.
Sure.
So this is then the second part of the question, choices for the future direction of staffing. You know, we think we've got 4 things to really be looking at, and we'll kind of then have a poll after we have a discussion about what people are thinking. We think, you know, if the nonprofit continues down a similar path, we can afford to hire a 3/4 or half-time employee and pay them a living wage. That seems to be the most straightforward path here right now. A second choice is the nonprofit stays in existence, but it evolves to be a fully member-led organization. In other words, we don't have paid staff. That means, you know, there'd be reduced staff and membership fees with the model. Doesn't mean that reduced expenses totally, but it's another choice. Third choice is the nonprofit disbands. And the network becomes just an informal coalition of members who meet semi-regularly. No staff, obviously no membership fees. Staff really doesn't think it's a good idea, but certainly open to discussion today. It's really kind of our reality that was here in Asheville, you know, before we opened the doors of the Collider. It's how we were operating. So, you know, didn't mean we didn't have a network, but, and then of course we got the fourth choice, none of the above. None of us is as smart as all of us. And so it's one reason we wanted to have this conversation today. You know, what are members' ideas for how this is going to happen as well too. So would really like to, I think at this time, right, Megan, open the floor to discussion. And, you know, I think we can discuss kind of both points and people can kind of be free ranging to be, you know, kind of going on. Yeah, go back to the other slide, maybe the 2 big questions. Right. I think that this is kind of what we're talking about. Okay, so Megan, won't you be seeing who wants to comment online? And I've got 2 or 3 people that are raising their hands here. Yeah, so Robin's asking if we clarify something.
What does, when you go back to the slide about the staff, what is the staff doing and performing for the members? I mean, is that really clear to folks?
So the question is what is the staff doing and performing? A variety of things. First of all, you have to keep membership rolls and dues being paid. You have to be paying the bills. You have to be interacting with the board. You have to be maintaining the website. Megan, help me out here.
We have 2 newsletters that go out. So writing those, social media, we've a donor relations has been something that has been a struggle, but we've been working on. What else? Business strategy has been a big occupier of at least Miles and I's time, like trying to brainstorm ways to increase revenue. Over the last 5 to 6 months, a supplemental income has been contract work. So we've been spending a lot of time doing that, but that would be a moot point, I guess, in this reality. But yeah, managing or keeping up with the budget, member roles.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, I think that that's good. So Megan, do you have somebody online that wants to make a comment or ask a question?
So far, no.
Okay, so it looks like John Ross has his hand up. As John's coming up, John has not only done some voluntary work, but also a little bit of paid work for the Collider over the past year as well too. So he's got a little bit of an inside view on some of these things, but here you go, John.
Well, you know what they call PR people? They're outhouse help. So you have to understand that. I have a couple of questions. First of all, for members, how many members have seen their businesses grow by virtue of their involvement with the Collider? And that's the first question. I think it'd be really interesting to quantify that, so we could communicate that to other members to let them know that this is indeed not only something that is in something we're all passionate about, which is making resilience part of everybody's everyday life and addressing the major issues of climate change, but also it puts bread on the table. And so being able to communicate that point, I think, is really essential. The other question I have is that not only am I outhouse help, but I really resent being a slacker. On the other hand, how is the information from the Slack poll going to be gathered and coalesced into a set of recommendations that would be one, fed back to the membership, and then also fed to the board? And my sense is that maybe a small group of key people that have been active and involved, not necessarily financially, but active and involved in the work of the Collider, might be a small task team that could lead that effort and in communicating the information back to the members, getting their responses, and then providing input to the board.
Yeah, I think that that's a great idea. And obviously what we want to be saying is a lot more active members, helping and communicating with that. So yeah, I think that sounds like a good idea. Megan, do you have somebody online that wants to comment?
Not currently.
Great.
Nobody's-
So Jenny has her hand up. So Jenny, if you'll come forward.
Oh, I just had a quick reaction to the comment. John, is that right? Yes, John, great to meet you earlier. You asked the question of how many members have seen growth, and for some other members, I'm wondering if the question would be, who has received benefit, right? So one is a quantitative metric, the other is just being able to articulate the benefits of being part of the network. And they could be two different questions, but they're really, how can the participants of the Collider able to either advance their program missions, services, products, and see a growth, whether it's in revenue or clients or whatnot. So in my case, for example, at the Research Institute, I would be able to appropriately respond to the first one, and we see a benefit, and then we can kind of describe it. Thanks.
Great. Yes. What no, please come up. I'm just thinking about protocol, just like we just saw happen. Why don't you just introduce yourself? And that way everybody will know exactly who everybody is. That's great. Thanks.
Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Sherry Wheat. And when I joined the Collider 2.5 years ago, I joined my marketing business, which we're an inside sales team. We work with small businesses, mostly in Atlanta. And then I met Mary Olson here, and we have formed a partnership and started the Climate School Asheville. And we basically got shut down by COVID. We were ready to start putting events and retreats together. And one thing that we've looked at is that I think could work very well for Collider is a membership program that is unlike anything that we're doing right now, which is an online annual event. It's monthly, where we're sharing information with the community at large, not just Asheville, but it could be regional and it could be national, where we engage people in actual activities associated with topics that we want to educate people about. So we've in the process of partnering with Ann Waple on an initiative like this with Earth's Next Chapter. And again, it's a year-long event and it is a revenue generator. So I'm marketing, I'm all about the more the merrier. And I think that we've got what I would consider to be sort of a passive membership right now, but we could have a very active membership, and we could engage all of the members in there to bring forth their intelligence, but also we have all of these experts in our community, which we also could engage. So that's something we're interested in doing also as a generator of income for our organization. Might be something we could also do for you guys. So.
In the room, we've got Marjorie's hand up. Megan, do you have anybody online yet?
Nope, nobody online.
Come on down, Marjorie.
Hello, I'm Marjorie McGurk. I'm president of Case Consultants International. And I've been with the Collider since before it was a Collider, when it was a nonprofit of a different name, maybe SCI. It would be difficult for Case to quantify or qualify the benefits of the network post-September 2020. There's just not enough experience there with the COVID inactivity period. Quantifying and qualifying the benefits of the Collider pre-September 2020 would be a less difficult task. We have benefited enormously from the address, from being here, from having a beautiful building that shows up when you Google Case Consultants International. We benefit from having a lease. We were allowed to bid on government subcontracts because of that. We've grown explosively even during the COVID times because of that address. We've grown from having event space, a loss leader sometimes, a break even other times, but being able to run events here reliably has given us contacts that let us have something to speak about, which greatly expanded our own network and business opportunities. We've grown also from the chance meetings in the hallways are the person that sits to my left in the co-work space. I have hired almost every single person who happened to be sitting to my left in the co-work space. So beware, I don't know why it happens that way, but chance encounters are like that. Things that you say to people that you hear in passing down a hallway. So the spirit of the Collider, so aptly named as giving our company the success that we sought in all three areas of where we do business: government subcontracting, direct consulting with businesses, industries, and communities, and thirdly, running climate events. Thank you.
Yeah, we've got another hand up here in the room. Anything there yet, Megan? Great, come on down here.
I'm Mary Olson and the other half of Climate School Asheville. And I want to speak more directly to the fact that before Climate School Asheville was even an idea, I approached the Collider to do a volunteer project. And I want to reflect on that for a moment. I really think we have to understand that COVID is the interrupter, disruptor. And disruptors are incredibly valuable. I'm not saying we shouldn't see the value in it, but I agree with Marjorie that you can't really assess where we are and going to be a year from now if in fact the pandemic is receding. We don't, any of us know that for certain that the pandemic is receding, but in terms of talking about the nonprofit and its existence, I want to just reflect on the fact that for the last almost a year, I've been a Collider volunteer in the Asheville community setting up a photojournalism project called Faces of Climate City. And I came to this project because I met a photographer who was saying, I want to do something about climate. And I said, well, what's your work? And he says, I'm a photographer. And I said, perfect, we'll do a photojournalism project of the people in Asheville who are working on climate. And first the Express jumped right on. I got a call right back from the editor. And then they only wanted to do one edition. We wanted to do 12. And so went to Citizen Times. It took a while knocking on that door, but now I'm working with the top guy there. Super happy to be working with the Collider, super happy to have the content. There is a huge opening in Asheville always because it's like a beach and people come and people go. And that means there's always a new group of people here. And so for a nonprofit, that means there's continuous opportunity. So I'm not necessarily selling Sherry's version of a different kind of membership, a subscription that isn't the same as an organizational thing or a virtual, I'm a virtual member, but some opportunity to see the nonprofit continuing to exist in this community. It's open, it's fertile, it's avid, and the reception is incredible. I mean, we've had half-page spreads in Saturday Citizen Times editions for the like 10 months in a row. Unbelievable. So it's here, we're here. I don't see any reason to give up.
Great. Megan, do you have somebody?
I do. Eric would like to speak.
Great, thanks.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I just wanted to comment, Daily Breath is an allergy and asthma app. It's in the health domain. And so an actual former director of the Collider once told me, he said, the Collider membership wasn't essential to my business. And it struck me at the time, he was right to a certain extent, but remember my start. My start was finding a climate scientist, in this case, Marjorie McGurk with CASE, to help me understand through a literature review what the impacts of weather variability were on allergy and asthma. And so that was basically taking a context for a health condition, right? Environmental factors. So for me, the Collider has consistently been a part of understanding health in a changing climate. And 5 years ago, that didn't seem to be a very big topic. 5 years later, it's a very, very big topic because we have major extreme weather events and we're beginning to understand the daily impacts of air pollution, a whole range of things. So that's one thing I think. Context is very important. And I still feel a tremendous connection with correlating these health conditions with environmental factors and then a changing climate. So that's one important thing. The second thing is just to explain a connection, right? So if I meet Paul Walsh at an event 4 years ago, I think it was ClimateCon 4 years ago, Paul Walsh is now working for Breezometer, who's providing my pollen data for my platform. And I think it just shows that, we're an industry that's maturing. Climate, environmental factors, weather, all of these things are converging. And so I just want to make that point, the context that you make, along the journey, sometimes it's not an immediate connection. Sometimes it happens over time. The third thing is, I've been deliberate about coming down to Asheville in person. And I think that's probably important to maintain, a strong connection with the community. But through my connections with the Collider, I've had outreach with people within the community. Melissa Booth with the Science Communicator has helped me with climate messaging and messaging around pollution and increases in pollution in the context of climate. I actually met Ty Seddon at the Collider, and we had initial conversations, and Ty's been supporting me tremendously with technology support and architecture support with developing my platform. And all of these are connections that I made, because of my connection with the Collider, and in some cases met at the Collider to continue these conversations with people that now I continue to work with, today. So I think there's strong benefit. I think that you have to realize that, the market is dynamic, and the exciting part is that that dynamic is increasing exponentially. Okay, and I mean, now's the opportunity where the opportunity begins to expand and explode, I think. And so we have to just figure out as a community, how do we leverage what's coming to actually figure out how to, keep viable with the Collider, and, support, at least some staff that can continue to help us. But I feel like even under COVID, there's been some momentum among the members that's driving movement, that's driving support. I mean, again, and I think the other thing too is you got to realize I've been very patient. It's taken me 5 years literally to get Daily Breath out in a go-to-market posture that I'm really happy with. And this morning I was on a Weather Geeks podcast that'll be released next week with Dr. Marshall Shepard, explaining what I'm doing with Daily Breath. And so these opportunities are just tremendous. And at the end of the day, Daily Breath is a member of the Collider. We're listed as a member of the Collider. It was climate science that was the foundation for the initial Daily Breath Risk Index. The patent for the Daily Breath Risk platform is a joint patent that's pending with Marge McGurk and Case Consultants International and myself with Daily Breath. So there's a lot of things that I think are coming down the pipe that are exciting. And I think hopefully we can keep the momentum going.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Eric. Appreciate it. Anybody else in the room?
I think you had somebody virtually.
Okay. Great. So Ian, why don't you come up and talk? And then Megan, why don't you get the next person that wants to talk ready right after Ian talks?
Perfect.
Hello, everyone. Ian Johnson. I'm hearing a lot of really nice success stories coming out of the Collider, but we need to be honest with ourselves. Is there anybody who's going to answer these damn questions? Thank you.
Ken, if you'd like to speak.
Hey, good morning, everyone. This is Ken, and with that setup, I'm going to answer the questions. Yeah, let me just echo what I heard John, Mary, Sherry, Marjorie, Eric, everyone say. There's a lot in there that I can say without a long-term relationship with the Collider has occurred for me within a very short period of time with Solar Crowdsource. Bolstering what we're doing, passing along what we're doing, reinforcing, sharing, et cetera. It's just been very, very super helpful. And we couldn't have gotten a lot of things we've done without the Collider. But also just to kind of add for the board's sake and the decision makers' sake, that I think that one bar you showed where the events were starting to tick up, and then of course COVID came, should be maybe a compelling reason to lean into that event part of the equation, given that the co-work space itself is in a different mode right now, financially. And I say that because I think the events itself has a lot of upside, small, medium, large, to plan between now, the end of this year and next year, could pay big dividends in networking and growth in some of the areas that we're striving to make the network grow. And I think it'd be a shame if that opportunity was missed in the wake of COVID, when in fact it might be more fertile ground than it ever was, with everybody wanting to come back. And I think it's kind of a means to an end. I say that because I think the events itself will lead to other things. And with regard to the questions, that's exactly my point. I'd be glad to be helpful in contributing to help forge some of those events with paid staff or with volunteers. And I think from out of that might even come some finances that would bring staff aboard. So my underscore for the group here is lean into events and don't let the nonprofits slip away. It takes a long time to set those up. The seeds were set in motion a long time ago by Mac and others. And not to see those go away is my main message against these two questions. Thanks.
Great. We've got Scott in the room. Come on.
Well, I'm with Case Consultants International. I'm Scott Schubert, and know many of you, most of you. Case has really benefited a lot from at least the potential benefit of having a nonprofit serve as a conduit for grants. And I think the contract opportunities you have there, taking the for-profit companies in the Collider and looking for grants that require a nonprofit partner in order to be successful in application. It's an important area to I think to pursue. So, for example, we had a proposal that we took to the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation through the Collider that would probably have generated $50,000 worth of income for the Collider as part of the grant administration component of that. So I think there's an opportunity there. Jenny and I were talking this morning. She mentioned climate tech as an opportunity. Obviously, I don't think the space is set up to be the place for solar panel installers, but clearly you've got research divisions for these types of organizations. They probably have industry organizations that support their industry, and that's a potential source of income. Climate policy. Imagine if you could bring in, even if it's just this simple, as the Public Works building on Charlotte Street starts to become something that the city of Asheville markets, perhaps the folks who are working there in the Office of Sustainability could be relocated to this spot. And then climate media, we've heard from some folks who are doing that outreach here, and that seems to be a area that there is some potential for expansion as well. But the last thing I'll say is that the Collider has sort of been the victim of a couple of perfect storms, if you will. We saw the income that dropped immediately as a result of COVID. But don't discount the fact that just as the Collider was getting off the ground, we had a very monumental presidential election that hampered abilities to work with the federal government in an effective way because certain words were not allowed to be said. And that has changed substantially. And I think there's an opportunity there that should give us reason for optimism at this point. So that's what I've got. And if there are any questions, I'll answer them, but I hope they're not. All right, thanks.
Megan, do you have somebody else online?
I don't.
Okay, we've got Mary here.
Hi, Mary Spivey. The hat today is NEMAC Science Editor. It's been chair mover here at the Collider back in the early days, and then it was as executive director for about 1.5 years. I'm going to try to articulate all the things that have run through my head because it's what, 2016 to now, 5 years of things. In the Collider, when it first started, it was just like this golden thing, right? This golden child. I met Claire when we were looking at her apartment to see if we wanted to rent it. And she knew I was moving here and I was involved in climate. She said, go to the Collider. So I did. And there were no jobs, so I volunteered. And then I got a job. And then I lost the job. But that's okay, because I was in a startup and I felt very trendy at 50 to be involved in a startup and be fired from a startup. I thought, this is cool. So then things just kind of simmered for a while. I did my thing. Did a little writing, and got another call from Claire. She said, have you been reading the papers? And I was like, well, not really. But it was back in April or May, I guess, of 2019. And she said, well, we're going through another iteration. I was like, okay. So I came back. They asked me if I wanted to come back, and I did. And I think if I can be honest, the struggle for the Collider all along for staff has been the struggle between running a nonprofit and running an event center, because either one of those is a full-time job. And back in the early days, there was just 3 of us, Kathy Peterson, Josh Wilson, and me, and Bill Dean. And we were the ones in charge of running the nonprofit, which Kathy handled all the publicity, which was great. But then it was Josh Wilson and I to handle everything else, which was events, co-work, labels. People come in, you need a sticker on their desk, and it was just overwhelming. And then, so over the time, over the various iterations of executive directors, things have, been run in different ways. And now when I came back in June of 2019, it was like nothing had changed. We weren't able to overcome that. So we were trying to grow this nonprofit, and all the time we're like managing the membership and and whatnot. So I would that's just a cautionary tale. I mean, events were awesome, right? The vibe up here is so amazing when there's events happening, but we have to think about how we're going to manage that. It can't be one staff member unless you want that staff member to run away. I'm kidding. But yeah, so however we want, of course, things are different now that the nonprofit is separated from the floor. But again, someone has to do that. So we have to think really hard about that. And then, how to grow the nonprofit. That's been on our mind since day one. And I think like you said, Scott, there has been a lot of climate journalism, and Tom Fiedler of the AVL Watchdog has been a real champion of the Collider. And in his latest article, he said, the Collider is viable, and maybe its time just hasn't come, but maybe it is coming. Like you just said, maybe it's now time. We have a friendly administration. COVID is hopefully we're seeing the backside of it. And the last thing I'll say is that all of us are here because we just can't quite let the Collider go, right? We just have this idea that it's gonna work and we just have to find it. I wish I was here to give all the answers to that, and I'm not, but I'm here to say that I'm really still looking for the answer. And that's why I still hang out and think about it.
Thanks, Megan. Anybody else online?
No, not yet.
Oh, I just don't think I've cleared those yet, but Karen's going to come up. Let me just look at those chats quickly. Thanks, Marjorie. Okay, cool. And Ken and Eric. Okay, great.
Hi, everybody. Karen Rogers. I am interim director of NEMAC, UNC Asheville's NEMAC. 2 weeks before COVID started, I took that role, thanks to Jim leaving his former position with us. Good timing. I just wanted to come up and kind of follow up from what Mary was just saying and saying, looking at the questions we have here, NEMAC, we are committed to the Collider and have been since we have been the anchor tenant since first people moving in here, and have since then, since 2016, have donated or have had our staff donate their time to contributing from IT to business planning to various other things. And we're still ready and willing to continue to do that. But I just wanted to kind of follow up on that second question as we're starting to look at some of the scenarios that they're posing here about staffing. If our runway now is to really only have a part-time staff member to help run the nonprofit, I really urge us to focus on what that person does for all of us. And I've heard a lot of different options here. Event space, event management, that was really great for us. We really enjoyed it. I was so enthusiastic after the opening that we had in March of 2020. That was fantastic. We saw so many people, and just the networking and the fact that we just knew so many people. Events are definitely a plus, but I also hear the grants management option of, could somebody do that? Would that be the largest, benefit for our group here as a collective membership? I don't know what it is, but it has to be, we have to be very focused, because if we're only going to get 20 hours a week out of someone, they can't do it all, just as what Mary was just saying. I just wanted to kind of iterate on that. And yeah, I'm excited for this conversation.
Okay, Megan, anybody online?
Yeah, Jen.
Okay, great.
Oh, you're muted.
Thanks, Megan. Thanks, everyone. So grateful to be here today. I'm Jennifer Powell and part of the Climate and Health sub-network, an independent consultant in public health, and trying to figure out the overlay between climate and health in the work that I do, and have made fantastic, built built great relationships where we were creating some traction there before COVID. So I hope we can return to that. In answer to the questions, what I'm wondering and where I would be willing, part of my past life was small startups with not-for-profits. And what I'm wondering that might make it easier for us to answer the question is if we could build out the member contribution model. So for example, what would be like a food co-op, like, how many hours a month would we be willing to sign up to do? And what would be those kinds of things that we would be doing? And how might we support the staff? Are there some of us who have expertise in the grant management area or financials or, this infrastructure that has to be sustained, and with a part-time person, then, how might I take my skills and competencies and give back to the Collider in some way that could be equal to or in addition to a financial commitment that I would be willing to make each year. So yeah, I'm willing to work with you on that. Like, what would it look like? Because I think for us, where we're trying to build a business, stay in business, it's hard for me to know what I'm signing up to do. Like, what am I willing to do? I don't know. I need for you to, can you present some options to me? And so I'm saying, I think there may be one or more of us who may already be working with you on that, but I think that it would be really helpful to kind of have a more specific set of kind of possibilities of level of contribution. Could be a combo platter, financial and in-kind in certain infrastructure activities, or, perhaps some of us may want to focus more on infrastructure, but would be willing to do that if we knew what the ask was. Thanks for letting me share.
You have a new chat item, Jim.
Okay. Okay, so this is something from Mac directly to me, but yeah, Mac, I'll be happy to. As most of you know, and we've mentioned here, there is a growing now national move, change of the administration. So, it's probably not just NEMAC Fernleaf that's involved in these things, but I'm sure other members as well too. But certainly we are working, through NOAA, and there is a program coming out, which, you'll start hearing quite a bit about. And then it was actually just kind of announced last week in a workshop called Code. But it's something called the Climate Smart Communities Initiative that we're going to be involved with quite heavily. It's already driving quite a bit of growth for Fernleaf. There's going to be other business opportunities related to it. But, that reality is changing as well, too. But I think, the other part of that reality is how people want to work. That, I can represent Fernleaf in this discussion. Most of you know Fernleaf quite well. Jeff was also here on opening day. One member, an individual member company. Fernleaf is now 11 people and probably going to double in the next year as well too. But the three most recent hires have not been here in Asheville, because that's not where they need to be to do the type of work, post-COVID. And so I think, we're going to be seeing this type of move as well too. And we need to recognize that that's a change in the marketplace. So I think that there's substantial growth. Now, I think the other thing, I can say is Fernleaf is dedicated to be staying in Asheville. So I think, we're going to benefit. You've recognized some of the names. Mary talked about Josh Wilson. Well, Josh was part of the Collider, now, VP of product development at Fernleaf. I can kind of go down the list. There's been a huge benefit for being part of the network and being here physically as well too. Obviously, I would not have volunteered my time and continue to volunteer my time if I didn't believe in the strength of the network. But we do have to get to the point of what Ian was talking about and Karen was talking about. There's a difference between what we would like to do and what we can actually implement as a network as well too. And so we're going to keep having some interesting and difficult conversations. But I do think, as Scott said, you know, with Trump being elected, it had a pretty strong negative impact on the sector. With Biden being elected, the exact opposite is happening, that we are seeing a much larger increase in demand than we have actually supply of people to meet right now. And so it's exciting times. And we have to figure this out because our society, our nation needs trained people to be providing climate services, whether it's adaptation or mitigation. And that's really the promise of the Collider, right? Our network, and why we kind of show up here. But there is a gap between that promise and the day-to-day operation of getting this to work as well too. So yeah. Hopefully, Mac, you know, I've said enough not to get myself into trouble, but enough to actually talk about, you know, that increasing demand as well too. Looks like I've got a couple more comments in the room here. Megan, do you have anybody else online? John, you want to come on up?
No, nobody online so far.
Okay.
Well, there's just one more thing I want to mention. You know, Jim's absolutely right. You all have talked about the change in federal leadership. That's really critical. But we get up every morning and we look at the news and we see what's happening in the West Coast, and we see what's happening in the coast of Florida, and we see what's happening in the Midwest, and we see what's happening in New England. And so the urgency for dealing with climate change is now, it's today, it's this very moment.
Yeah, Robin.
Hi, I'm Robin Cape. I'm the board chair of the Greenbuilt Alliance, and we're guests here today because we're looking at entering the space and seeing how we can bring our organization into relationship with not just the space, but with perhaps the Collider membership, all that kind of, we're here listening, right? What do the members want? Where are their synergies of efforts? A little bit about us. I'm here with Sam Ruark, who is the executive director, and we've grown in the last 5-6 years from a budget of 150,000 to over 750,000, from 1 employee to 10. We have become the face of the Blue Horizon Project, helping implement the city and county initiatives in the community. We are oversee the Earth Savers Network. We implement all the actionable green built environment certifications, and Sam can fill me in. I'm gonna, a couple of things we're really interested in, and so that's my hat over here, where I'm saying, membership organization. We've got examples of our directory we publish every year. We put 20,000 of those out. All of our members get their face in that directory. We have a great, robust website. We do trainings and all that kind of stuff. Members do want value. They want value for their membership. What does that look like? And how do we express that? Part of our interest in maybe being involved up here is we think there's an added value to our members, and that together with, maybe we can create some synergy. So we're just here in the listening opportunity, work together stage, because we want to collide in that same space. This place was started to put climate into action, right? We feel like we are one of those organizations that are doing action. So that's why we're interested and we're up here. Now I'm going to take off that hat and I'm going to put on my real estate hat, because I became a realtor after I left this project. And, Claire and I are talking about how I can help draft clients to this space. But as much as we talk about people being able to live and work everywhere, you know, a lot of people move into Asheville and they don't have the bandwidth to do what they need to do. You know, don't forget the bandwidth we've got here. My executive director lives at Earth Haven, but he wants to come to town 3 days a week. He's got to come to town 3 days a week. He's got to come and have the kind of access and engagement. And many people, whether they're remote or not, can dry up sitting in the living room trying to shut out their kids and their dogs from barking. So we've got to sell, even if it's not full time, the additive of being up here around other adults, having the kind of bandwidth to do your business can add so much, not just to people remotely. I mean, certain people can live remote and never come in again, but I see a lot of you here whenever I come up here, and it's for a reason. So, you know, real estate has proven to me that people can't live just anywhere and work anywhere, because right now we don't have the infrastructure for that. And even if they can do partially do that, they still need to come to a place periodically where they can perform their business. I think the Collider offers that.
So I can't resist telling a story. That was Robin Cape, for those of you that don't know it. There was an early group that faced similar challenges here in Asheville, and that group was called NEMAC. That NEMAC got some initial seed funding through a government grant to establish the group, but it soon became obvious that it wasn't ability to maintain itself. And there's 3 people in the room that I reached out to help solve that. That's Robin, Scott, Marjorie. And we just hired NEMAC's first employee, which was Karen, here in the room as well too. But we had to ask the question, how could NEMAC be self-sustaining? And it was through the support of a network to be not only writing letters of support, but being there for when we were interviewing for one of our first large pieces of funding, which was from RINC, to make the center self-sustaining. It's not a new story that we're facing. But we do have a history of success from exactly the people that are passionate about this. It's why we're here in the room today. We've always looked at the challenges of doing business in Asheville. There's always an Asheville tax we have to pay for the quality of life here, but it's often more difficult to do business here for a variety of reasons. You know, what I'm hearing today is a strong support of the people, but also we have to get through the reality of how that is actually going to work. And so, Megan, maybe you could just pull up the Slido poll to kind of maybe finish off here. If you've got your smartphone with you or any way to communicate, you could just go to slido.com.
Yeah, it's
right.
Yes.
And there is a number 316354. This is not a binding poll or anything else like that. But from what we've heard today, and for those of you that are willing to, you know, support, what seems to be a beginning consensus of kind of the 4 choices that we're looking at, you know, similar, you know, the nonprofit continues a similar path. We hire a 3/4 or half-time person to be overlapping with Megan for the time that she's here, and then taking over some of those responsibilities. And then hopefully we'll raise more dollars. That person could become full-time, and then we could add staff as that works. The second choice is, no, let's not think about staff. Let's go to totally volunteer. I would tell you that I don't think board members are interested in being staff. So if you think about this part of the model and you think volunteers means board members are going to be replacing staff. That's not the model sitting through here. The third is the nonprofit disbands. And then the fourth is none of the above. I'd like to do something different. So maybe take a few minutes. Let's just at least see where the discussion is before we adjourn today's meeting and start opening this up to individual conversations as well as online and all as well too. You get into slido.com and then it's going to ask you to enter with this number.
Do these tag our identity in any way?
No.
So all the people who are doing none of the above have to come forward in some other realm where?
Yeah, exactly. And we're going to
Well, the question is, how does one come forward, on email or?
right. So Megan, let's just give this another minute. And then Mary Olson's asking the question, okay, well, how do we take those next steps? So we probably want to go back to that slide about how we're going to take next steps.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, it's not next steps. It's that we've been given the option of none of the above. I'd like to offer my suggestion, a very specific
Right.
question to how we offer.
Right. So Mary Olson's saying she wants to be able to say if she's answered none of the above, how do we capture the own suggestion? But I do think it fits into the way that we've got.
So I guess there's two options. We could have them briefly describe it on the recorded call, or I'm going to be sending out the directions for the online discussion forum on Slack, and you can just describe it there, and then members can respond.
Yeah. Just again, to honor everybody's time, and I do want to thank everybody for showing up. It is getting to be right at noon. We do want to have a way to capture these suggestions. And so could we recommend that those of you that want to make a suggestion, you email Megan and I, and both of our emails were in the invitation, and we're going to start collating that. And then Megan, can you just pull up the slide? Because I think, you know, we're starting to get some diminishing returns here, but we'll fully, you know, announce the results of this beginning poll here as well too. But it's, yeah. So it's here. We're going to discuss options and vote on Slack, but also if you prefer to communicate by email, we can do that as well too, but we're just trying to make this as transparent as possible. So also in any emails, just let us know how else you'd like to be sharing this information if it's not in Slack as well too with the rest of the members. Does that seem fair? Well, thanks to everybody for the very active participation today. I think we've very clearly heard the energy and the passion of the active part of our members. I want to certainly thank those of you in the room, because there's a big difference between active members and total members. And I think, you know, we've seen that today as well too, but it's also probably going to be the active members that are going to be probably still carrying this forward. We'd like to, you know, recruit more active members so that shares the load, but we also want to come up with a viable solution as well too. So thank you very much.
And thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. Thanks to everybody. And
thank you.
I think we're ready to end the meeting.
Yeah.